The rise of grunge in 1991 kind of took the place of heavy metal and to some extent thrash metal. It took their place in the contemporary music scene, and as a lot of metalheads know, it threw a lot of these bands into an identity crisis. Metallica cut their hair and started making radio rock. Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, they both split with their singers during this time. And a lot of bands were afraid of playing an antiquated style. That antiquated style, of course, being heavy metal, thrash metal, so a lot of times they tried to force grunge into their music, and a whole lot of crap came out of that. But what about the artists that stayed true to their sound, or that managed to adapt in an adept way? What can I say? I have a huge vocabulary, I'm very smart. What can I say, people? So I picked out a handful of heavy and thrash metal albums from the 90s that I think are worth consideration amongst the band's classic albums, but that likely got passed on over solely due to the decade of their release. So, here we go. So starting in 1992, from Germany, SODOM, Tapping the Vein. Speed is pushed up to 11, Angel Ripper's voice is super deep and guttural, and this album is very influential to death metal because of that. This is the final SODOM album to feature the fantastic drummer Chris Witchhunter, who not only kept up with the increasing tempo, but also wrote the lyrics to two of my favorite songs on this album, the album opener, Body Parts, and one of my favorites, The Crippler. What's just a lie? I will break your spine. Don't just follow the crippler. Drop that gladiator. But yeah, they recently just reissued or repressed this album on vinyl. It's a double vinyl LP. Got this nice gatefold here. And pressed on red vinyl. Very nice. But yeah, these songs will dig deep into your mind like an RFK brainworm. The catchy of which, amongst all the scorchers, is the super groovy song, One Step Over the Line. Over the line. Disease, but turn into desire. And if you are concerned about this album being front-loaded, you've got the punky Vakterm on track 7, Tapping the Vein on track 8, and the awesome grand finale of a closing song, Reincarnation. Tapping the Vein. Now in the year 1993, Dio, Strange Highways, and kind of like a lot of other heavy metal artists at this time, I think Dio opted to diversify his sound, let's say, but instead of adding grunge as an element to the heavy metal sound, Dio opted to go the alternative metal route. And while other heavy metal bands, maybe adapted to a sound that they didn't necessarily care for, just for the sake of maybe getting a Hail Mary radio hit, I think Dio took the commercial demise of heavy metal as something of an artistic challenge. My understanding is that Dio actually was listening to stuff like Nine Inch Nails and Tool, as it was coming out around that time, and I think Dio saw this as a chance for heavy metal to evolve. And Dio wanted to show that he could evolve to the new sounds of the contemporary metal scene as well. So he got a new guitar player, Tracy G, who is appropriately androgynously named, given Dio's previous guitar hero, Vivian Campbell, who used to be his guitar player. And Tracy G's got kind of an interesting sound, kind of an industrial sound, which is definitely not really something I would expect from Dio. But I'll be honest, he finds a way to make it work, and I think he just brings the riffs. Although I would be lying to you if I didn't say that this album isn't at least a little jarring at first. You've got the usual very positive, optimistic, and fantastical Dio. He's got song titles on this album like Hollywood Black, Evolution, Give Her the Gun, Blood from a Stone, One Foot in the Grave, and of course just the aptly titled Pain, not to be confused with the fucking poser-ass 3 Days Grace song, and if you even bring up that song, then you're a poser. Wait.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
And then, of course, when you listen to the album, the first track, Jesus, Mary, and the Holy Ghost, it's very bizarre. It's a very weird song. Took me a few listens to kind of get used to it, but I think that was an intentional choice by Dio to kind of show people, like, hey, I'm not fucking around. You want something different? Here you go.
Did you see the teacher?
But I do think the album becomes kind of an easier listen as you go on. Like some of the aforementioned songs, Hollywood Black, One Foot in the Grave, Give Her the Gun, you know, those are some of my favorites. And like I said, Tracy G's style is definitely outside of the realm of what most Dio fans, you know, myself included, are kind of used to. But I think he uses the effects and all that in a very practical and effective way. Like, I don't think he's just trying to jam-pack as many different, you know, flangers or phasers, what have you, over his guitar tone. I think he uses them to great effect. And yeah, if you couldn't tell from the track listing, Dio was not a happy camper when they recorded this album. So yeah, you know, if you're maybe more into extreme metal, and you're like, I don't really want to listen to Dio, Dio's a geese, Dio does geezer metal, give this one a spin, because it's got a more intense vocal performance from Ronnie James Dio. The guitar tone is a little heavier. I say, you know what, just give it a spin. What's the matter? Afraid you might like it? Alright, now we move on to one of my main inspirations for making this video. Slayer, Divine Intervention from 1994. And one of the reasons this is my main inspiration is because, quite frankly, for the longest time, I avoided this album because it came out in 1994. You know, I'll get some 90s stuff from 80s bands from like 1990, 1991, because by then, grunge hadn't really taken over yet. But, you know, by 1994, the party was well over. But, you know, I go to the record store, see this in the bargain bin for $3. I'm like, fuck it, it's Slayer, it's $3, who cares? I spent $3 on worse shit, right? And one important thing to note about this album is that it is the first with Paul Bostaff, who left Forbidden to join Slayer. And a lot of people just write this album off solely because it doesn't have Dave Lombardo on the drums. And to me, that's a shame. Although I also suspect a lot of people write this album off because the first track, Killing Fields, despite having an awesome opening, you know, minute and change, it is a somewhat jarring song, kind of like with the Dio opener, Jesus, Mary, and the Holy Ghost, that was kind of weird. You know, like the first minute and change is cool, but then once it kicks into the main verse, the odd time signature really makes itself known.
You know the feeling when adrenaline takes control. Can't beat the rush that leaves a suicidal hole. Instincts best no one destroying the human heart.
I love the song now. Granted, it took me kind of a few listens. But the other songs on this album kick ass. You know, most people with Slayer would say their classic run of albums ends with 1990s Seasons in the Abyss. But for me, it ends with Divine Intervention. Because this album has songs that can hang with Slayer's classics. And because Diabolos in Musica is diabolical for how much it sucks. And for the most part, unlike Diabolos, this album actually sounds like Slayer. You know, there is a little bit more kind of hardcore influence, and there are some songs where Tom kind of has some vocal layered effects or whatever, but it sounds like Slayer for the most part, even down to having kind of somewhat subpar production. Now, granted, the reason for that is, I don't know why, but the record label would only book them like 4 days a time at a studio. So you go like Monday through Thursday, you're going to be at this studio in Phoenix. Then for the next 3 days, you're going to be at this studio in LA, and then for a week, you're going to be at this studio in Miami. So, you know, sometimes the album can sound a little inconsistent, and that's probably why. But, you know, it's not like Slayer ever had the most pristine production anyway, so who cares? Wrist rule. We move on to 1995. King Diamond, The Spider's Lullaby. Now, King Diamond never strayed from the traditional heavy metal sound, and from this grunge era, he had another quality release, 1998's Voodoo. The Eye, of course, is also amazing, but that's 1990, so that's outside the scope of this video. And King Diamond strays from his usual formula a little bit in the sense that this album is not a concept album. It's just a collection of tracks. I think there might be like a suite of tracks that is a coherent concept, but quite frankly, for me, when I first got this album, I just remember listening to the first 2 songs, From the Other Side and The Poltergeist, just on repeat over and over. And I'm not gonna lie, first time that I heard From the Other Side, I heard the intro to that song and I was like, that sounds familiar. And I was like, you know what? I think Alexi Laiho from Children of Bodom might have taken some influence from this album. But yeah, this album is the usual King Diamond affair. Melodic heavy metal, you know, the melodic genius guitar solos of Andy LaRocque, and King Diamond's iconic falsetto vocal harmonies. And some nice deep cuts on this album are Eastman's Curse and the song 6 Feet Under, not to be confused with the terrible, terrible, terrible death metal band. Alright, now we move into the year 1996. Merciful Fate, Into the Unknown. Sticking with King Diamond's other band. And quite frankly, you could pick anything that they did in the 90s. You know, for me, I would say their 1993 In the Shadows and 1994 Time make the podium for me. But Into the Unknown stands alone at the top. And like with King Diamond, Merciful Fate did not waver in their heavy metal sound. You know, the only difference between their 90s stuff and their 80s stuff is basically just an upgrade in production value. If you know Merciful Fate, then you know what to expect. You know, melodic songs, great riffs, King Diamond's falsetto. Although the title track actually does kind of have some different stuff. You know, the intro starts off with like these clean guitar chords, and then there's a section with this weirdly syncopated like bass and drum part, which might be an odd time, but I don't know, but it sounds weird anyway.
It is so much colder in here. Hold on to your soul, my dear.
But for me, my favorite tracks on the album are The Uninvited Guest, Ghost of Change, and Under the Spell. Still in 1996, Motorhead, Sacrifice. And here's my elevator pitch for this album. It's Motorhead, but it's heavier, and it's got Mikkey D on the drums. And quite honestly, I think Mikkey D is the best drummer in Motorhead's history. You know, I think he's better than Filthy Animal, both technicality-wise and musicality-wise. And that's not me slagging Phil. All right, Mikkey D is better than basically 99.9% of all other drummers, because Mikkey D is the fucking man, and he did your mom.
Children matter all the world. If only you believe, then only you will die. How can you not see the stars in your eyes?
The best way I can kind of describe this album is almost like dirty thrash with a good helping of blues in there. You know, this album sounds very grimy, and it sure as shit don't fuck around either. My favorite tracks from the album are the title track, Over Your Shoulder, Order/Fade to Black, and the super bluesy Don't Waste Your Time, which kind of has this like old school kind of rock and roll piano sound type thing going on in it. Moving on to 1997. In the UK, Saxon, Unleash the Beast. How many times do I have to tell you people that Saxon is fucking legit? Alright, in 1997, Saxon took a look at the wider heavy metal landscape, the dearth of quality, and said, alright boys, we're fucking Saxon, we're legit, we're gonna come together, we're gonna make a goddamn classic heavy metal record, because goddamn it, somebody's gotta fucking do something, alright? Someone's gotta step up to the plate. Or I guess the wicket, rather, because they like cricket over there, right? But this album is solid throughout. You know, kind of in the mid to late 80s, Saxon kind of strayed a little bit from the traditional heavy metal sound to kind of get more commercial and stuff. But they flew all the way back around to straight up heavy metal for the time to make this album. You know, it's got a double bass drumming, twin guitar attack, and Biff Bifford's classic hollering. Come on, people. My favorite tracks from the album are the title track, Terminal Velocity, The Thin Red Line, and Cut Out the Disease, which I think is a song that Biff wrote about a couple of some ex-Saxon members who I think were trying to sue him at the time for rights to use the name, and I feel like he just kind of delivers his lines with just a little bit more venom.
You circle around just like a vulture. You're waiting for your piece of meat. Beneath your charm there's something hiding. The way you spin your vicious web.
And finally, we arrived to the final album on my list, coming out in 1999, the year of my birth. Dokken, Erase the Slate. Erase the Slate is a pretty good title for the name of this album, because Dokken started off the 90s being split up. Then they released a couple albums in the mid to late 90s. You had 1995's Dysfunctional, which is kind of a little different from the usual Dokken sound, but I think it's okay, it's alright, not great, not terrible. But then you had the absolutely atrocious, abysmal war crime that is Shadow Life, and that album sucks! So for this album, Don Dokken, you know, kind of gathered himself. He sacked George Lynch out of the band, and he brought in Reb Beach, the guy from Winger? What the fuck? I'm a Beavis and Butthead fan, so when I heard they got the guy from Winger, I was like, oh, that fucking pusswad band? But I gotta say, Reb Beach, I owe you an apology. I was not familiar with your game, because this guy can fucking shred. Now, to me, it sounds like for the production, what they were trying to do was almost make like an 80s glam album just with 90s production. You know, by my ears, it's kind of more stripped down. There's not as much reverb. It's not really as glossy, but the songs still kind of have that like 80s classic style glam sound to them. But yeah, picking this CD up at the, used metal bin, it really surprised me how good it was. I thought maybe it'd be kind of top-heavy, maybe have a couple good singles, and then a whole bunch of shit throughout. But as I kept listening to it, I was like, oh, I like this song, like this song. My favorite songs on the album are the title track, Change the World, Maddest Hatter, Voice of the Soul, and In Your Honor. Which, I mean, look, you can't have a glam metal album without a power ballad, all right? And sue me, I like ballads, okay? Don't laugh, all right? Don't laugh. My dad works at YouTube. If you leave a mean comment, I'll get you banned. Don't laugh. I'm serious. I'm serious. Don't laugh.
Years have I been this way. The lines grow deeper, time fades away.
So yeah, that's my video. And after reflecting on everything that I said, all those other albums suck. I actually think the only good metal album that came out in the 90s was 1996, Load by Metallica. Come on!